I was married 51 years, 5 months, 3 days, and 1 hour before Jim died. We had dated very little because my husband was in the service, and we just never seemed to. I loved to dance, and our lives were very different. We were married in Mississippi. He asked me to come down and marry him, and before he went overseas, because he said he would get in front of the first bullet that was shot if I didn't. After we were married and he was home from the service, we had 3 children, and we had a house in Dorset at first for 5 years. I later realized the reason he was moving me so many times was because that way he was getting me further and further away from friends and from people I knew, and we never had a telephone, never. Back when we were first married, I never could leave the house because I didn't drive, but I did have my hometown, but we were only there 5 years, and then we moved to Bennington. Each time we moved, then we moved to Brattleboro. Each time was further away. Sometimes Maine was 300 miles away. He loved coming to Maine and living because then I had no phone, and I could write letters, but you certainly aren't going to write home to your folks and say that you're abused. What would you do? I mean, my folks were poor farmers. You just couldn't take 3 children and go home and live on them. And each time he knew the further he went, the least attempt I could make to ever leave him. And you never could leave him. He would go out and take all the money. If I got a card from home and Mother would put $5 in it for my birthday, he would have opened the card when he picked up the mail and give me the letter and say, well, she didn't put any money in, I guess. And then she would say, well, you didn't thank me for the money, and I'd know. But I would make up an excuse and say that I've been so busy with the children that I haven't had time to write. I never had money enough for a stamp, usually, which seems in today's society, maybe that's why I write so many letters now to everybody I know. I couldn't back then. I was trying to paint the outside of our mobile home. I had left one part of it because I thought, well, sometime the hornets that go between the seams of the mobile home, I thought, well, sometime that the sun is going to go in and they're not going to come out. And so I finally said to him, now, I'm right outside the window. They were little bedroom windows and high. And I said, I'll be right outside the window. If you want anything, I'll put down the paint and come in, because he was a bad patient always. Every 15 seconds you were in there waiting on him. And so I went out and got up the ladder, and I had done most of it. No hornets. I was so happy, and because that was finishing that terrible job. And all of a sudden he came out in his underwear. He hadn't been out of bed. I had used a bedpan for him for at least probably 3 weeks, maybe longer, because of the 2 sessions of operations. And he came running out around the mobile home with a broom in his hand and hitting the sides of the building. And it, of course, all the hornets came out. They were in the seams underneath the little screws, and it was an old mobile home. And I was stung on the face and my hands and all of my arms. I couldn't believe it. And then he just put down the broom and strutted back into the house and got back in bed. And my cousin called and said he had just ridden home with Jim from the meeting as far as his house, and he said he was all over the road and out of the road, and he said he has drank everything that's in the Legion Hall. All the whiskey was gone. His money was gone, because they did put a little donation in for their drink. And he said, hide any money you've got. Hide your checkbook. He's going to go to Manchester and he'll kill somebody because he can't keep the car in the road. And Jim got home, and he says, get his switch keys if you can. So Jim got home, and he took the, I took the switch keys, he threw them down and started for the bathroom, and I took them carefully and just let them fall behind the desk. He came back in and couldn't find them, and he wanted the checkbook or some money. It was midnight or so, I guess, and so he wanted me to give him some money, and I said, Jim, I haven't any money. Where's your billfold? Well, that's all gone. And so anyway, he wanted the the keys to the car, and I said, I guess you have them or something. I tried to make some excuse. Anyway, he took my arm and bent it way around back and broke it. But he'd never take me to the doctor, so I could have it fixed. So I still have the bump, the bruise. Everybody always treated Jim very well. He always claimed that that anything he ever did was the cause of his mother's dying when he was 12 years old. And he was a great, I always said he could have been an actor, because he would put on this, all these displays of to get attention. The thing that really, well, he would go to church, and toward the last few years we were there, and we were living there. He would go to church and give the Gettysburg Address, and you know the ending of that, we are all created equal. And he would stand there like a very wonderful person and give that with such fluent words. I always wanted to stand up and say, now would you like to hear about the real Jim? But I never did. I mean, I couldn't, because he said if I ever told anyone, he would kill me. And he even bought the house in Dorset where a man had pushed his wife down the stairs and nearly killed her. And he always reminded me of that.
So his threats were very constant?
His threats were definitely very constant, but never when anyone was around. Sometimes he would slip up, but it was usually somebody that knew him well enough so they didn't dare ever say anything. So he was in the hospital, then he was in the Mount Ascutney rehab for 3 weeks. And I was told then that I should never take him home, that I could never handle him. They couldn't do anything with him. He hurt people, he did all kinds of things. And of course, he was sort of, they thought, out of it because of the stroke, I guess, but he was clever. And so when he finally talked me into having him come home, they made arrangements for the visiting nurses to come, but they were only given, they were so busy, an hour or so, and so that was to get our groceries. They would go to the store and get the groceries. I never got out, never. He wouldn't let me leave the house anyway, and there was no way I could, because nobody wanted to stay with him. And he would drive them away or do something, because by the time I got back, they never would stay again. I knew. But the visiting nurses had been told by Mount Ascutney not to leave Martha without checking on her for bruises and things. And one nude girl, I didn't know that, they had been told. I looked at the paper, because one nude girl couldn't read some of the words, you know, of the directions of what she should do, you know, and she was a little confused, and I saw that on the corner of the paper. I guess it all started when his last stroke happened. I put on the corner of the papers I made out at Springfield Hospital that Jim was very abusive and I could take no more of it, and could they help me? They did. Well, they alerted everybody. Though he was still very abusive, of course, no one lived with us, but at least they knew to watch. And so when they came once, and my eye was all festered from being sprayed with Glade potpourri spray, which he went in the bathroom and got and sprayed the Pekingese eyes and my eyes when I was cleaning off the little Pekingese. they came and found my eye so I couldn't see out of it. And he had me reading to him. He always tried to harm me just enough so that it scared me, and I didn't dare do anything or say anything. I didn't dare tell anyone. My folks died not knowing why I couldn't come and see them. But I think they probably knew. I thought it would get better, but it never did. Never. Even when we were alone and the children were grown, it got worse. The doctor called me and said, you need to come in for a physical. It's time you had a physical. And it wasn't, I knew. But Jim didn't know. And so the nurse said, and don't miss this, Martha. You'll be sorry if you do. And so I knew something was up. And he had made arrangements for him to make this, have this operation and go. And so I told him then that he must, not to come and take Jim from. He asked me where I wanted him to go, and I said the Bennington Veterans Home, I thought, because we had lived in Bennington at one time, and it was about 60 miles away from home, and they knew if they had him near home, he would come home and hurt me. So they were alerted that they were to operate and he wasn't to come home. They made arrangements for someone to pick up his belongings at my house, and he was never to come home again. I felt a big relief, such a big relief. I'm ashamed to say I went home and did a Scottish jig in the kitchen. It was so, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I was going to be free. But it was such a wonderful feeling. And that's when I wrote the first 3 pages that next week of my story that I had planned to do for over 30 years. I knew he would never get word of it or see it. It was such a relief to know that you didn't have to put up with all those, to hide all those of the bruises. I think you stay with a man that abuses you because, well, maybe some of it's pride. Maybe it's because when I went to marry him, I wasn't really sure. I didn't want to marry him. I thought we were getting engaged. But he sort of talked me into it because he had no family to come home to and all these things. And my mother made the remark, you make your bed, you stay in it. You don't come home. If I had left, he probably would have hurt me worse. I mean, you know, it would have been worse for me than to have abide by it. But today there's so much help for women. They should tell. You can't keep it inside. Writing my story was the best thing I ever did. It was something that brought it out. It was therapy. I would remember things that happened years ago that I had forgotten all about. And by expressing that and putting it down on paper, you sort of relived it and you got it out of your system. You can't keep that in there. And my keeping it in there, I think, made the worst harm that anything could happen. But I'm thankful that did, because I'm alive today. And I had lived with that for over 50 years before he was put in the hospital.
What a survivor you are.
I'm glad I'm alive because I intend to live the rest of my life in happiness if I can. He was quite a character. Nobody I'd ever want to know again.
You know that old trees just grow stronger, and old rivers grow wilder every day. Old people just grow lonesome, waiting for someone to say hello in there. So if you're walking down the street sometime, spot some hollow ancient ash,